Okay, I think just about everybody's here. So welcome everybody, first of all. It's so great to see you all here. I'm Don Lafreniere. I'm the project director here with the team at Michigan Tech and Wayne State for the NEH Community Deep Mapping Institute. We're all very excited that you guys are all here. Thank you very much for all the energy you've already put into this, for your proposals, for um, putting up with the massive amounts of calendar invites and Slack invites and the chaos that we accidentally caused with the listserv. But I think we've got our feet underneath us now. We kind of know where we're going. So what we're going to do today is this is orientation, and really our main aim here today is to kind of help you understand the structure of the institute, to have you all have an opportunity to meet each other in a virtual way, and give you a little bit of information on what our current plans are, and then make sure we have lots of time for Q&A as we go along. Sarah is somewhere in this box of humans. Sarah is going to manage moving the slides around, and each of the Institute directors and staff are going to kind of introduce themselves as they get to their portion of our little presentation we have for you. And then we'd obviously ask you to do the same when your team is going to be doing your short presentation. So Sarah, go ahead and move the slide for me. So if you have questions along the way, just because there's 62 of us and there'll be a few more people probably joining late, please use the Q&A tool that's built into Zoom. Mark can wave. Mark will be managing the Q&A as we go along. So go ahead and put questions there, and we'll find times for you to kind of speak up and ask your questions orally, so everybody gets a chance to meet you. If you have a question, or if it's kind of easy stuff, he'll answer it there in the Q&A. But let's use that as a way of sort of communicating as we go along. Okay, Sarah? Okay, so let's give you a little sense of what this institute looks like and sort of the composition. So as we mentioned in our invitation emails to all of you, we had over 1,086 applications from 237 teams. And so it was, we had a great pre-holiday break season, sitting down and looking at everybody's applications and materials and CVs, and it was a joy to read all of them. And as you can imagine, a lot of fun trying to narrow down to get to the 9 teams that we have here today. So we're very excited to have the 9 of you. We feel like we have a really nice diversity of sort of experience, expertise, disciplines, team compositions. We were really pleased to be able to have 4 different countries represented in the Institute this year. So we have a team from Sao Paulo, we have a team from Alberta, from Dominica, and then a number of teams from across the United States. We've got 5 states represented in the Institute. So we have a group from New Hampshire, from the Shakers Museum, the Canterbury Museum. We've got a group from North Dakota. We've got a group from Detroit, a group out in Oklahoma, and then actually 2 teams from South Carolina. So we're really happy to have that kind of group. And all together, there's 62 of you. Okay, so there's 62 Institute fellows who are participating in the Institute. We're trying to keep track of disciplines and fields, but as you probably have gathered looking at us, we're very interdisciplinary type of scholars ourselves, and so are so many of you, with so many different kinds of backgrounds. So it's at least 13 disciplines and fields. We know it's more than that because identity is a thing, and it's hard to do that. But the point is, we have a lot of different ways of thinking and approaching deep mapping and doing this kind of work. So we're really excited to have that kind of diversity within the ways of thinking and knowing. And we're very pleased to be able to bring 23 of you, so about a third, up here to the Keweenaw this July for the in-person program we'll be hosting shortly after the U.S. Independence Day holiday. So just a quick overview on sort of the team here at Michigan Tech and at Wayne State. So I'm Don, Sarah, we have Sarah and Dan and Krista and Mark and James and Bob and Ryan and another Dan. We have a lot of Dans at Michigan Tech, especially in our department and our research facility. So we've got 2 of the 5 Dans, I think, here. So that's our team, and everybody will get a chance to sort of introduce themselves briefly when they get a chance to talk. So, okay, so I want to kind of go over some of the big higher level aims and objectives of what we want to try to accomplish this year as an institute. And these are not in any particular order, but in particular, you know, what we're trying to do is to expand the scope and practice of doing deep mapping by integrating public-facing transdisciplinary scholarship into the spatial humanities, historical geography, and all the various disciplines that we sort of have represented within the institute. Okay, and we highlight integrating because that's really important. That the public-facing components and the transdisciplinarity is centered. That we do this with all of our different ways of knowing and understanding together, and we do it with communities. So that's part of one of our aims. The other is really to move from the theories and concepts of deep mapping, which have been around now, since 2012, really. And I was actually part of a group that kind of helped develop some of those theories and concepts back then, with David Bodenhammer and John Corrigan and Trevor Harris and a number of others who came together for an institute just like this in 2012 in Indianapolis to kind of start building those theories and concepts. And we're sort of now looking all these years later to say, okay, how do we move from these theories and concepts that we've been working on for, you know, over a decade to really trying to develop this foundation of practice, right? So how do we do this? And how do we actually build these things? And how do we actually make them happen? But with a specific emphasis, which is sort of the expertise of our team, is really on supporting community histories in the process of doing that, okay? So that's why it's the Community Deep Mapping Institute, okay? Another aim are for all of you to receive instruction from the experts in deep mapping, from folks in the historically minded social sciences and a wide range of heritage fields. And one thing that was really important to us as we put this institute together and we chose who would be the fellows in this institute is we want everybody to be learning from each other. And so a lot of the teams were chosen because you have things to bring to the field yourself, right? We're leading the institute, but we're all learning together. And you have important experiences and expertise that you're bringing to the institute, along with what the sort of the institute hosts are bringing and providing to the institute as well. And I think that's something that we hope we can really elevate throughout the virtual workshops, but especially I think that's really going to come together in person when we're all together then. And then another aim is that the teams of fellows all of you will be able to apply your skills and be able to create prototype deep maps using data drawn from your research programs and from your projects, right? And we asked you to describe that in your application material. So that kind of comes out. One thing we do want to say, and this is a big piece of kind of norming the institute, what we're looking for, is that what you're going to actually be able to build in 1 year is going to vary substantially based on how far along your projects are. Some of your projects are really well developed. You've got your data, you've got your community relationships. A lot of these things are already kind of in place and you just kind of are at the execution phase. Some have brand new projects and we recognize that. And so we don't expect to see one level of completeness. We expect them to all vary. But the idea is that you'll come out of the institute with the tools, techniques, and ideas to be able to go off and build your deep mapping projects, okay? But you won't always, all of you, be able to necessarily actually finish one in a year. Okay. Sarah? Our objectives to train new and established scholars and heritage professionals in the use and coupling of advanced geospatial technologies together to do deep mapping, okay, to really, again, center around the doing, okay, to establish some best practices for doing public-facing deep maps through community-based research design and evaluation. And so you'll see when we talk about the workshop, the various workshops that we're going to be doing, a lot of this will give you those tools to be able to do some of this work, but together we will develop a new set of best practices for the field of deep mapping. Also to learn how to determine methods for and approaches to creating immersive experiences in deep mapping. So this is something that is sort of really on the technological cutting edge. No one's really doing that yet, and that's something that we want to together advance the field technologically and see if we can push the envelope there on the immersion side. And I think we've got a good team here in the Institute to do that. And then to really demonstrate how having these transdisciplinary collaborations that all of you have established to build your teams and what we hope to foster through the Institute can really contribute to building a more inclusive community of practice between like across academic fields and between academic and non-academic heritage practitioners. And so that's why it's really important that we look for teams that have a good composition of having not just academics and not just community heritage professionals, but a mix of both. Okay. So the first half of the Institute will have a number of virtual synchronous workshops. And these are some of the topics that we've already established that we kind of built out over the holiday season after we had the teams of fellows, after you all accepted, and we knew sort of where your projects were at. So we'll have one on scoping a deep map project. That'll be our first one in February. We'll have a workshop on community partnerships and ethics. We'll have one on data linking, building out of HSDIs and data management. And some of these acronyms we'll get to a little later. We'll have one on digital data, the ethics and permissions and about in and around digital data, and one on dissemination and co-creation. Okay. We're also going to have asynchronous modules. So those virtual modules and workshops will be on Zoom, kind of like this, although we'll use breakout rooms and some other methods rather than always being together as one big group. But we're also going to be building a number of technical and professional skill asynchronous workshops that you can kind of work on your own. And the reason we're doing it this way is not all projects need everything. And so we'll build those out and you can access them and use them as you need. And these are still in development. I mean, some are done, but some are still in development, and some of these topics may change the more we get to know what the needs are of your various teams, right? But we'll be doing topics like georeferencing, geocoding, digitizing. These will be all web-based abilities to do these things. Digital spatial storytelling and placemaking, public engagement with deep maps and different strategies and tools and programs for that, and low code or no code mobile apps, which we'll do a lot of that also when we're up here in the Keweenaw next summer. And then there's the immersive in-person portion. Now, these are some, I'm not going to read them all. I'll let you read those. These topics and lessons are what we currently sort of have plans for, but again, these are still being developed. And the more we learn about your projects and we see your projects develop over the next 6 months, these will be adjusted accordingly. But these are the types of things that we're kind of planning on doing in the in-person portion of the Institute, while also enjoying being in the Keweenaw, which is an amazing place to be in the summer. It's never warmer than, rarely warmer than about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius. Blue skies most of the time, rarely rains. We're next to the largest freshwater body on Earth. It's beautiful. We have beaches and we'll be having bonfires and and eating pasties, and it'll be, we're going to have a really good time. But while we're having fun, we're also going to be and touring around all of our heritage sites and our amazing industrial heritage landscape that we have here. We'll be learning these things as we go along. So again, just a quick preview of our host community. So we're on the Keweenaw Peninsula. So you look at that map on the upper right, that's that star there, and that peninsula juts out into Lake Superior. That's what we call the Keweenaw. It's an indigenous term from the region. And but we also call it Michigan's copper country because we are a region that was home to one of the largest copper mining. We're one of the earliest and largest copper mining regions in the United States. So sometimes we use both terms for ourselves. So if that's confusing, I wanted to explain that. So we're in the copper country. That picture in the bottom right kind of gives you an idea of what our industrial heritage landscape looks like. We have a lot of that all over the region, and we'll get to interact with it using the deep map that we've developed for the region. But we also have the beautiful forests and lake as well. We'll also be spending time in our heritage communities. We've got 42 small communities in this region. We're not going to visit all 42, but we'll be spending time in a number of them, utilizing the tools and working with our community partners so you can understand different ways in which you can work with communities and using deep map technologies at the same time. We might get some northern lights. July is not an ideal month for that, but it happens. You'll just have to stay up till 3 a.m. to see them. And James will talk about this later, but that picture on the upper right is the residence in which we will all be staying next summer, which is called the Lorium Manor Inn. So, okay. I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Great. Hi, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me. Good. I see nods. Hi. So I'm Sarah Scarlett. I'm a historian. I'm a social historian and a public historian here in the social sciences department at Tech. So by way of a little bit of introduction, some of my research is about social power and domestic landscapes, especially in industrial communities. So you can imagine this is a really wonderful place to do this kind of work. I work with a lot of vernacular architecture and cultural landscapes and material culture. My public history experience comes from a good number of years working before I was here in this job as a museum curator. So I've brought all that together, and my role with developing the Keweenaw Time Traveler over the last bunch of years and working with our great team here has been in a lot of the digital spatial storytelling, placemaking, and the kind of potential and researching the role that deep maps can play with heritage sites and community members. And I really look forward to working with all of you. So I am going to be the person running the slides as you all get to introduce yourselves. So we're really excited to hear from you. Thanks to all of you for sending me your slides. We are modeling this after something that we do at Michigan Tech, which we call Tech Talks, where we have research symposia where we'll often get up and we get 2 minutes and 2 slides to talk about a research project. We're giving you 3 minutes and 3 slides because we know from experience how hard it is to present something that's so meaningful and exciting to you in a short period of time. So we know. Think of this as just the beginning. This is your first chance for all of us to be getting to know each other. And obviously we're going to have lots of other opportunities to do it. But because there's so much to try to cover today, we are going to ask you to try to stay within 3 minutes. If people can see me while you're doing it, I'll sort of put up a 3-minute when you get to 3. So do please try to finish up if you see me doing that. This is the order that the slides are in. It's a fairly random order. Take a look if you can to get a sense of where you are, but I can kind of call on you when we get there. Okay. Okay. I'm going to move forward. Whoop, if I can, hang on. There we go. We're going to start with our group from Oklahoma. And I think you should be able to unmute yourself and just speak up. Oh, and when you would like me to advance the slide, just say Sarah, and I will do that.
Right, I guess me me toca. All right. Our project is a collaborative deep mapping project based in Ottawa County, Oklahoma, a place comprised of sovereign territories of the Quapaw, Seneca, Cayuga, Miami, Modoc, Wyandotte, Ottawa, Peoria, Shawnee, Eastern Shawnee, and Cherokee nations, all of whom were forcibly relocated to this area by the U.S. government. Undertaken as a partnership between the lead agency and OU's Department of Geography and Environmental Sustainability, our work combines oral history, storytelling, audio, song, art, and geospatial analysis and modeling. Residents in Ottawa County grapple with multiple environmental justice concerns. There is the Tar Creek Superfund site, a former lead and zinc mining zone that the EPA has identified as one of the most complex cleanup sites in the country. There's also a benzene plume beneath a former tower factory and severe flooding caused by the Pensacola Dam. Our project illuminates risk and public safety concerns. It also aims to validate the experiences and memories of residents impacted by environmental injustice in Ottawa County. Sarah, please. Like the rest of the state, oh, Snapdragons, we had animation, but we'll just have to, like the rest of the state, the northeastern corner of Oklahoma has a long and complex history of settler colonialism. Mining practices started in the late 1800s have rendered uninhabitable a great deal of the land promised to sovereign tribal nations. This contamination has forced already displaced peoples to make difficult decisions related to health, safety, and connections to this place that is now characterized by hills of mine tailings known as chat, not to mention severe lead poisoning. We undertake our project as a labor of love. We highlight what Ifu Tuan and others refer to as topophilia and hydrophilia, that is to say, attachments to place-centered, watered life ways. To do this, our deep mapping project combines qualitative and quantitative ways of relating to, imaging, imagining, and reimagining place. We expect to blend stories and other meaningful representations with geospatial analysis of historical environmental change, such as chat pile movement and land surface subsidence. Sarah, please. Remediation of the Tar Creek Superfund site has been ongoing for more than 40 years, and cleanup is expected to take another 100 years or so. For the benefit of impacted communities, we want to learn how to create deep maps that not only translate geospatial data and protect people in Ottawa County, but also catalyze community engagement, bring joy, and foster futurity. We need to learn how to create accessible maps that are legible for a variety of audiences. Members of our team possess a range of geospatial skills, from extensive expertise to rusty and even non-existent. We want to learn geographic pedagogies that foster the lead agency's capability to maintain the deep maps that emerge from our project, and we want to prepare OU students for all academic careers in the heritage industry, advocacy organizations, and elsewhere. Finally, to do all this, we need to learn how to find success with funding bodies, not only NEH, but also NSF and maybe even NASA. Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Laurel. And I will say, there might be some animation, if you all had animation in your slides, that may have gotten lost. I had to shift things from many different platforms into our Google Slides. So, patience all around, please. So great. Thank you so much, Laurel. So next we have our group from Charleston.
Hello. Apologies in advance. I believe we do have 4 slides, but we're rule breakers down here in Charleston, so we'll just go with it. So our project right now is called Exploring Descendant Communities Within the Spatial History of Charleston. My name is Danielle Cox. I'm a digital historian at the Charleston Library Society. My 2 principal investigators along with me are Doug Ribbett and Jim Newhart. They're professors at the College of Charleston with a long list of qualifications that I don't have time to list here. We are also working with a long list of other institutional partners, including the International African American Museum, the Preservation Society of Charleston, and the City of Charleston Archives. I'm not sure how many of us are here. I know there's a couple I saw. Next slide, please. So long term, we'd like to collate as much spatial data as possible from 300 years of Charleston history. We were founded in 1670. But for this first phase, we're probably going to focus on a tool that's community accessible, that covers Reconstruction, so the end of the Civil War, through the mid-20th century, specifically related to communities developed by the first generation of formerly enslaved people. Our partners have access to a wide range of data, which we've listed here. And this image here is an example of that. It's from a 19th century police record that was just digitized at the Charleston Library Society. Next slide, please. So this serves as a deep map by aggregating a variety of different data sets and base maps from many different sources to create a tool accessible to a number of different audiences for different purposes. So I'm a public historian by training, so I'd really ideally like anyone off the street to be able to gain something valuable from this map. But in order to have a wide-scale impact, professionals like urban planners will need to customize the way they interact with advanced data for their own ends. Next slide, please. So as I sort of already touched on in earlier slides, we want to create a foundation that will be able to grow and be valuable for whoever wants to use it. Charleston has a lot of historical sources and a lot of interest in using them from an incredibly diverse group of stakeholders. And we want to give them something that can help them grow and preserve their histories and communities. And of course, this is a very sort of bird's eye view of what this project is going to be. It's going to go into some nitty gritty. But we kind of want to make it as much as it can be for as many people as we can. And I feel like that was less than 3 minutes, but that's what we got going.
That's great. Thanks, Danielle. Okay, super. So our next group is our group from Detroit, working with the Femme Beings Project.
Good morning, everybody. In May of 2024, our interdisciplinary group was established by anthropology graduate students and now includes Sarah Pounders and Anna Sines, both master's students, Moselle Bowers and myself, both PhD students. Our research is focused on unearthing the histories of female sex workers in Detroit between 1830 and 1930 by using evidence from material culture and archival sources to understand the city's sex work industry and the role of women in facilitating these services. Our initial research suggests that sex workers represented a diverse group of women, varying in age, marital status, race, and ethnicity. This diversity fosters a nuanced understanding of sex work in the past that goes beyond simplistic stereotypes associated with the designated label of prostitute. Next slide. The FemBeing project will examine the interconnectedness between women engaged in sex work and the environment in the Potomac Quarter, which was designated as the red light district. This study will focus on the brothels, saloons, pharmacies, and men's workplaces that shaped the area's social and economic landscape between 1880 and 1920. Our project will create a multi-dimensional interactive deep map to explore how these spaces interacted and influenced this neighborhood. The map will feature locations where sex work occurred, as identified by historical documents. It will integrate data from arrest and court records for women who were labeled as common prostitutes and individuals keeping houses of ill fame. Court records detail their resident addresses, and newspaper accounts of these arrests will also be included. Sarah, next slide. Our goal is to gain and advance the knowledge in geospatial tools related to deep mapping, centered on creating accessible and user-friendly community and public-facing mapping research designs. How do we draw a broad and interdisciplinary audience to our work? And in what ways can deep mapping draw in researchers, community members, Detroiters, etc., to our research? How can we connect virtually to others in mutual beneficial way? We also find it integral to be able to network with other colleagues. We want to make many connections so that we can connect with students and other professionals, as this could provide further support and insight into deep mapping projects, tools, and overall connections with academics in the GIS, humanitarian, and adjacent fields. Thank you.
Super. Thanks so much, Julie, and to your other team members there. Okay. Next we have the Canterbury Shaker Village.
Okay. First of all, thank you for having us, for including us. Second, apologies for causing a revolution with my email. So really sorry about that, but the idea that I could cause a revolution, I think it's pretty cool. So, you know, what can I say? I'm Shirley Vida. I'm the curator of collections here at Canterbury Shaker Village. My colleagues are also here. Kyle Sandler, our head of education, Renee Fox, our collections manager and registrar, and Levi Saulnier and Sarah Frechette, who are our inventory curators. And we're all part of a team plus one more digital humanities person we are going to hire for this project. So, map as portrait. Canterbury Shaker Village's team will create a deep map focusing on two understudied aspects of this southern New Hampshire village: the individuals who lived here and the built environment those individuals created, changed, and sustained. We seek both to map the people who traveled to create this place and to chart this place and its 200 years of constant change and, paradoxically enough, continuity. Current knowledge and interpretation of the village's inhabitants is based generally on the village's leadership, whose records and recollections have been preserved and often published. We wish to dig deeper into who the rank and file Shakers were. By mapping basic vital information, we may begin to develop a new communal portrait of these utopians. Portrait seems the right word here. Its Latin root means to drag out, to reveal, or to expose. May I have another slide, please? So how is our project a deep map? I'm just giving you lovely pictures to look at. There are two foci here, membership and the built environment, that provide the bases of a deep map, which we define as a multi-layered representation of a place and its creators and maintainers over time. We will be able to visualize patterns now only vaguely limbed and understood. The village's archives possesses the 2,000 plus membership cards maintained by the Canterbury Shakers. This and a demographic study undertaken in the 1970s provide the two bases for this mapping project. Surprisingly, more individuals born outside of New Hampshire joined the Shakers, and this deserves more study. The cards contain the following information: birth date, birthplace, recent residence, admission, which is signing the covenant to become a Shaker, date, the removal date to those who left. The cards also include information on close family members. Such information will be double-checked and augmented with research on federal and other censuses, tax records, and other historical vital records. The village's elders kept accounts of daily life and events, including the biographical church record, as well as other records in the village's extensive archives. Second, the team will create a historical map of the village and its historic physical changes from 1792, when the meeting house, its first building, was constructed, to 1992, when the last Shaker died. Over the course of these 2 centuries, the Shakers constructed, altered, moved, and raised between 100 and 150 buildings, while creating a water system to sustain their elaborate mill system, agriculture, and community members' health. The collection holds important maps of the village and the surrounding area made by Shakers and later archaeologists. Shaker written building histories and eyewitness accounts in the form of account journals and visitor reports are all going to be consulted. Last slide, please. So what do we want to learn from this institute? Everything. Sorry, you're going to have to provide everything. So Canterbury Shaker Village has not yet fully entered the digital age, although we are investigating and working on mobile technologies and rethinking our entire interpretation of this national monument to figure out how visitors should or will or already do kind of negotiate the site. We are excited about the possibilities of deep mapping work for our research, interpretation, and visitor programs. In November 2024, we learned that the village was awarded a $2.5 million grant by Lilly Endowment, Inc. And so this project is part of building a bigger digital Canterbury. That's it. We're done. Thank you for that. I knew I was going to get close.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, Shirley. All right. So next we have our other group from South Carolina working on wood industries.
Good afternoon. I'm Jessica Elfenbein from the University of South Carolina, and it's my pleasure to be here today. And I think we may have the distinction of being the largest team. So I'll start with that. We're very fortunate to have a diverse team of very committed stakeholders, and I'd like to start with our community partners. We're working with Kyle Kelly. He is the senior planner for Sumter City and County. We are working with Liam Stein. He is an emerging museum professional with the Sumter Museum. And then we have Lynn Robertson, the longtime director of the McKissick Museum, our campus museum in Columbia. We have 2 USC digital librarians, Kate Boyd and Katie Hoskins, 2 history students, undergraduate Gracie Bella and graduate student, PhD student Mark Canavera. We have Kelly Goldberg, who is a professor of anthropology and archaeology, and 2 historians, my colleague Wright Kennedy, a spatial historian, and me, a public and urban historian. So our story is a story you may have heard, but certainly not for our place. It turns out that South Carolina is part of the wood basket of the world. Today, it features 13 million acres of commercial forest land, so that's about 2/3 of our state's total land area. Today, there are over 90,000 jobs, and forestry is, even in 2025, one of the most important manufacturing industries in the state. But despite its historical and current importance, there's been remarkably little scholarly or community attention paid to the history of lumber, wood products, or forest conservation in the state broadly, or in Sumter, a city with a population of about 43,000 specifically. We're hopeful that our multifaceted wood basket project, of which this mapping forest to furniture deep community map will be a part, will change that. So, yeah, next slide, please, Sarah. Sumter turns out to be this really interesting place that for just over 100 years has been producing huge amounts of wood products. Most notably, for about a quarter of a century, more barrels were produced in Sumter than anywhere else in the world, but also caskets and, very importantly, furniture. High Point is very well known in our region, but Sumter produced lots and lots and lots of furniture, but it's not even part of the narrative that Sumter tells about itself, which is, we think, pretty stunning. And so we've got this multifaceted project underway that includes all the things you see listed on this slide, although they cut on the edge, but you get the idea. And now we want to look for a way to do deep community mapping to bring all these incredible resources that we've had the good fortune to find, to digitize, to collect into deep community map. And like some of the other teams, we range from people who know remarkably little, like myself, to people who know remarkably much, like my colleagues in the digital library and Wright Kennedy as well. So we're hoping to be able to do important work that literally shifts the narrative of place. Third slide, please. And I guess, again, because we're such a big team and because we bring such a vast range of experience, we bring a lot of enthusiasm, but our experience really does vary very widely. And so in attempting to speak for the team, I think that these are some of the areas in which we're looking to learn about best practice. And I can stop there. I'm done. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jessica. Okay. Our next group is the group from Dominica.
Hello, yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you for organizing this, everybody. I am Diane Wallman. I'm a associate professor at University of South Florida.
I also have 4 slides, cheating, but we have the intro slide here, and I wanted to introduce our team really quickly. So we have me, I'm an archaeologist, Jonathan Rodriguez at the University of South Florida, who's also an archaeologist and PhD student, Mark Hauser at Northwestern University, who's an archaeologist as well, Kadeen Harris, who's an archaeologist at Rice University, and we're the kind of US team. And then in the Caribbean, we're fortunate enough to work with the Create Caribbean Institute as our local partner, who work to preserve and disseminate Caribbean culture and heritage. And they have 2 campuses, one at UWI in Jamaica and one in Dominica. So we have Jael Edmond and Joanna Jackson joining our project as well, who are part of the team at Create Caribbean to work on this. Okay, next slide. So the goals, I probably should have situated this a little in the Caribbean for everybody, but you'll see it in the future. So the island of Dominica is just a small volcanic island in the Lesser Antilles in the Eastern Caribbean, that's in between Guadeloupe and Martinique, 2 French colonies. And so the goal of this project is to kind of combine our archaeological data that we've been working on the island for years in various contexts with historical data, with GIS data, to develop a historic spatial infrastructure to focus on countermapping geographies, in particular, look at Black and Indigenous geographies. So we're using 3 archaeological sites to represent this that we've been working on throughout the island. So we're using archives, also participatory mapping, oral histories, along with this archaeological data. Next slide, please. So it's a counter map. How is this a deep map to challenge the dominant colonial narratives, right, that persist in the Caribbean and elsewhere? So really to provide kind of alternative representations, visual representations centering Black and Indigenous histories on the island, again, to challenge the dominant colonial narrative of European settlement and colonization and dominance throughout the island. So we want to really use this sort of big data GIS stuff to create a map to produce these counter maps. Last slide. It is really quick. So through this, we want to develop through this fellowship, we hope to develop a dynamic HSDI that, 1, represents change through time in this island through these counter maps, 2, integrates these histories at various scales, and is accessible to the public and valuable to different interested communities and publics in the Caribbean and beyond. And I think I'm at 3 minutes there, so thank you.
Super. Thanks, Diane. That's great. Our next group up is from North Dakota.
Hi, I'm Kristen Fellows. I'm an associate professor at North Dakota State University, and my other team members, I should say my specialty is in historical archaeology. My other team members include Angela Smith, a public historian who's at NDSU here with me, Stephanie Day, who's a geologist working for CBEC Ecoengineering. We have Tyrell Iron Eyes, the tribal archaeologist for Standing Rock, and Dakota Goodhouse, who's an instructor of Native American Studies at the United Tribes Technical College, and also a doctoral student in history at NDSU. All right, slide. As an understudied state with a low population density, North Dakota is oftentimes viewed as marginal to the national narrative, and yet it played a significant role in the Western expansion of Manifest Destiny. Trains were central to the white settlement of this area and helped to transport people, goods, and capital interests westward. The rail companies were also active participants in recruiting and relocating domestic and foreign-born whites to the region and transforming the land into industrial agricultural landscapes. Importantly, the glacially formed landscape of eastern North Dakota entails a deep history of human-environment interaction, as Indigenous peoples existed in this area since the time of glacial movements. However, white settler colonialism meant Indigenous communities faced ever-increasing containment and enclosure to the point that North Dakota is still home to 5 federally recognized tribal reservations. These tribal communities have been at the forefront of national and international Indigenous rights movements. So our project focuses on the deep history of the Red River Valley of the North and aims to incorporate environmental, Indigenous, and white settler history into a publicly accessible deep map of Cass County. Slide, please. Cass County will serve as the initial spatial boundary for this project. It encompasses many features of interest, so glacial Lake Agassiz, the Red River of the North, narratives and sites of Indigenous lifeways, historic railways, Fargo, Bonanza Farms, and rural homesteading and agricultural communities. Take an approach that foregrounds human and environment interactions, the steep mapping project will have a time range that begins approximately 10,000 years ago and has an endpoint around the 1920s as those bonanza farms transitioned into tenant farming systems. Data sources include geologic and environmental maps and survey data, including LIDAR, oral histories and traditions of both indigenous peoples and white settlers, historic maps and aerial photographs, archival materials like newspapers, farm-related documents, census records, and archaeological data from a historic farmstead currently under study. So our deep map aims to take a more holistic and interdisciplinary look at how humans have inhabited the landscape of the Red River Valley. All of our team members are really looking forward to adding to our individual repertoire of technical skills. For some of us, that's basic GIS stuff. Others are really interested in augmented reality applications. We also hope to expand our skills and knowledge regarding the public's interaction with maps and history and how such work can contribute to local, regional, and national discourses. Ultimately, we want this project to serve as a foundation for continued research and enhanced community engagement. I'm also personally really looking forward to having some external accountability to keep our project moving forward. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. Okay. Next, we have our colleagues from Sao Paulo.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm actually in California just now, so I think it's good afternoon for you all. First of all, I would like to say that we are very grateful to be here with you and to share this experience with so amazing groups. The Polyseia 2.0 platform is a work in progress designed for collaborative mapping of São Paulo's history, covering the period from 1870 to 1940. São Paulo is the largest city in Brazil and one of the largest in the world, for giving you some general context. The backend database is linked to an interface to allow interaction among interested researchers with the opportunity to feed the database with events that can be spatially represented. Next slide, please, Sarah. How our project is a deep map. First of all, as an open platform for collaboration, it stimulates new spatial perspectives on the city's history, going beyond what official cartography, academic knowledge, and state documentation provide. Second, by aggregating the diverse contributions in a single computational environment, the platform allows for the generation of new knowledge through the juxtaposition and comparison of the existing layers. And finally, the project's third phase, now underway, aims to engage community groups and collectives possessing their own historical archives to create informational layers for the platform, thus disseminating these archives and the associated historical knowledge. And the third slide, please, Sarah. What do you want to learn from the Institute? The primary goal of the project in this new phase is to deepen community involvement in collaborative mapping of São Paulo's history. We expect to gain technical expertise that will materially support the platform's role in engaging relevant communities, as well as methodological insights on the best strategies to foster such engagement. Engaging with the projects of other fellows will also enrich our repertoire of approaches. It's all. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay. Last project to hear from is Boom Bust Repeat from Calgary.
Thank you, Sarah. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. Hello, we're very happy to join you. Our team is joining you from two different places across Canada, so-called Calgary and Ottawa today. So that means we're coming to you from the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7, which includes the Niitsitapi, including the Kainai, Siksika, and Piikani First Nations, the Stoney Nakoda, which includes the Goodstoney, Chiniki, and Bearspaw First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. We're also coming to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. So our team is composed of faculty, museum practitioners and curators, archivists and librarians, as well as community members who come together. We come together in the auspices of a lab called the Energy Stories Lab here on the University of Calgary campus. My teammates who are joining us today are Jean-René Leblanc, who is a professor of digital storytelling and a visual artist from the University of Calgary, Rebecca Dolgoy, who is the curator of natural resources and industrial technologies at Ingenium, which is Canada's National Museum of Science and Innovation, the archivist and librarian at the Southern Alberta, Kim Giraldi from the Glenbow Western Research Center, as well as PhD student Jerry Stradoff, who's a PhD student in anthropology, as well as a visual artist and a computer scientist. And I'm an anthropologist. Our project focuses in on one county in Alberta, which, like I think some of the places that have been mentioned here, has a very deep sedimented history of multiple extraction cycles, hence the name Boom Bust Repeat. Foothills County has had 3 oil and natural gas related booms and one right now massive renewables boom, which includes one of the fastest renewables economies in the world, fastest growing renewables economies in the world. For us, conveying and communicating the nature of these cycles is really complicated, and yet it's something really deeply important to community members who have been impacted by these successive cycles. There's a preponderance of undocumented boom towns that have appeared and disappears, a very complex history of land dispossession, which, like many places in Canada, has resulted almost exclusively through the pursuit of energy, deep histories of contamination, now a century in, which have a lack of systemic monitoring. But this place is also idealized in the minds of many Canadians as a Western frontier, as a beautiful foothills, and its history is thought of as one of ranching. In many ways, this place is emblematic of resource development in Canada. So we, through our deep map, want to better understand the social, economic, and environmental impacts of successive energy booms and busts on a place, and also the people who live in relation to that place. And for us, it's really important to think about how we can visualize this cyclical change, because on the landscape, it's not always immediately visible. As you can see from the 2 pictures before you, a refinery that existed for about 20 years, in southern Alberta, the Hartel refinery, and what's left of the refinery, which is now on a private ranch in the same county. And what you can't see is, again, successive layers of contamination. The local ranching family has to do annual soil monitoring tests and keep their animals away from this place. Can we go to the next slide? What we really want to do is bring together a number of historical sources to a public, accessible, deep map that we can share with the broader public, but also that is meaningful to communities. So why is this a deep map? I think deep maps are really interesting because they can respond to narrative challenges. For us, it's interesting in a place where corporations have been the primary record keepers for the last 100 years. And so access is complicated, but also we have settler governments that support specific energy-related narratives of progress. And how do you interface with a polarized public about a complex topic? A deep map shares multiple and eclectic sources. For us, this means bringing together existing corporate archives at the University of Calgary, oral histories which we've been engaged with local historical committees, energy workers and residents, unconventional material collections, as you can see in the upper left corner, such as private archives that sit in saloons, as well as material objects like patchwork vests, but also the data from contamination monitoring organizations like our Orphan Wells Association. And lastly, a deep map for us has really important critical situatedness. It's really connected to local community historians and memory keepers, and very much emblematic of the kind of partnered community-led research and collection development that we're really interested in. Local justice questions should be prominent in a deep map. And the next slide, please. what we really want to learn is I feel like we bring a lot of, and already it sounds like a lot of really differing and complementary expertise. So we're really interested in joining a community of practice and learn through co-learning and co-mentoring, learning from all of you and sharing in a way that is not extractive. Hopefully, I think for us, some of the biggest challenges are those of representation, as well as kind of maintaining questions of visual, sensory, or data sovereignty. So of course, putting in front and prioritizing communities leads. And of course, there are technical challenges. Our group is not GIS technically savvy yet. Our technical expertise is really in the area of digital storytelling, but as well as visualization and augmented reality and immersive kind of experiences and audio environments. So we want to better understand how to integrate all of these technologies to really serve communities. And that we have a cheat fourth slide. If you want to see more about what we do, this is our website, energystorieslab.ca. You can see some of the apps we've developed and 3D models we've created. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sabrina. And thank you, everybody. It was so exciting to hear you all present your projects and all together. I hope you're all understanding why we are so excited, have been so excited to bring all of us together. We all have lots to learn. Thanks so much for bringing these great projects to us. I hope that's a great, exciting kickoff. I think I'm handing things over to Dan. That's your slide, right?
It is. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Treppel. I'm a co-director of the Institute and archaeologist here at Michigan Tech, studying primarily industrial and post-industrial landscapes in the Great Lakes region, amongst other things. And I've been working on the deep maps sort of underlying our projects now for closing in on 10 years, which is incredible. And I'm really excited to be here and to meet all of you today. What I'm going to do today is just a quick sort of guide posting where I throw out a little bit of conceptual ideas about what deep maps actually are. And, bearing in mind that you have lots of different projects, and we're going to be sort of exploring that together. But we have some ideas that sort of hopefully can give us some, broad boundaries of what we're talking about right now. Do you want me to share? So, okay, Sarah's bringing them back up. Sorry about that, Sarah.
Sorry, Dan.
Slight technical. No, that's okay.
Where'd it go?
We have I have some. I think I might have mine up. If you can't get yours, I can share mine. Let me see if I can.
Where did it go? Ah.
Hang on one second.
Sorry, Dan. Yeah, give it a go.
Okay, let me see if I can
Sorry,
get mine
everybody.
to.
Where'd it go?
All right. Let's try this. Can you see the slides now? Okay. Hopefully I can also advance them. I haven't tried doing that yet. Okay, there we go. It's slow. All right. So deep maps are something that I've engaged with in terms of practice rather than theorizing. I mean, I've read the theory and I've engaged with it, but actually building them was most of my experience. So this is kind of an idea, an articulation of it that I've sort of thought through and our group has thought through. And the essence is presenting the real world in some way, but doing it digitally, spatially, flexibly, being able to represent the interaction between the built and human environments, doing it rigorously, bringing in lots of different kinds of evidence and multiple sort of perspectives and views on that. And so a couple of sort of just characteristics as we've experienced in building them. First off, they're based on some kind of digital infrastructure that supports all of this. And so you're going to hear us talking a lot about the historical spatial data infrastructure, or HSDI. That's just our term for the digital infrastructure you need to build that supports all of this different kind of representation in essentially one place, and can do it sort of sustainably and powerfully. Some of the things that really characterize the maps for us and makes them special are the ability to look at change over time between humans and environments. All of the different factors that sort of come out in that process. You can visualize it in different ways. It allows you to interpret and analyze it both quantitatively and qualitatively. Important also is the ability to accommodate different perspectives on it, genuinely different perspectives that may be in conflict with each other, bringing different kinds of evidence and interpretation to see something more holistically. And finally, they are all in our.
You're breaking up and we're all having a hard time hearing you. So I'm going to share my slides and advance them for you. I think it's a bandwidth issue on your laptop. So why don't you stop sharing for a second?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, guys.
It's okay. No, it's technology. Let me share my screen with your slides.
And if I'm still breaking up, if you want to just take over, that's also fine.
No, that's okay. Can everybody see them okay?
Can you hear me better, or do I sound okay now?
Much better.
Okay. Apologies for that. Once I get going, I'm hard to stop. So, that the last point on the previous slide, if you can back up one, Don, was just that an essential characteristic of deep maps is public engagement in a long-term sustainable way that's not unidirectional. We usually characterize it as collaboration above all else. So it is a genuine collaboration. Next slide. And then sort of what they are not. Sometimes it's easier to define something by what it is not. They're not static representations. It's not just some kind of cartography telling a story. It's not just a story map. A lot of deep maps can be built from a story map as a starting point, but a story map is much more limited. A deep map goes far beyond the capabilities of that. It's not just juxtaposed spatial data, digital data, even if it's somewhat interactive. The idea is that different data sets support each other, are interlinked together, tell stories that no one data set can tell alone. It's usually very much about change over time and something more than a single moment in time and space for that matter. So it's about expanding the ability to visualize different perspectives and different realities as people see it. They're also not built with just one research question in mind, although they may start that way. There may be a compelling research question that leads you to build a deep map, but ultimately a deep map as we envision it should be something that can answer multiple questions, sometimes seemingly totally unrelated questions, because again, it's a representation of space that's flexible enough to allow you to explore it and learn from it and see things that no individual data set or method of visualizing or analyzing it could bring out by itself. Also, very importantly, these aren't single projects that are designed to have sort of a sunset date. They're designed to be sustainable, something that will live beyond the original researcher's sort of, research question, beyond this particular funding cycle, something that is able to weather the storms of funding and resources. And again, reinforcing my previous final point, they're not top-down presentations of interpretations. They are supposed to be interactive and collaborative with communities, with different groups of scholars and experts and community members. Next slide. And then sort of just finally, as I mentioned before, the foundations of our work, and to a large extent this institute, are the HSDI we developed ultimately for the Kiwana Time Traveler project, and subsequently a similar project, the Hamtramck Explorer, the latter of which is near and dear to my heart because that incorporates archaeology for the first time. Now, the Q and a Time Traveler in Copper Country HSDI as an overall project is, to our eyes, the first practical deep map that meets the sort of definitions and guideposts that I just sort of talked about through the static of technological sort of limitations here. And so we're going to use it as an example, but of course we plan to push the boundaries of where we are and go beyond it. So together it's about having you all contribute to how we define deep maps and pushing beyond where we are now. So these are active projects that you can look at. I'm sure many of you have already looked at them. And it's a way to understand the practice of deep mapping as a starting point for where we're about to go next. And I think with that, we are moving on to our next speaker.
And that would be me. Hi, everybody. I'm Krista Rzuski. I am a professor and chair of the anthropology department at Wayne State University, which is in Detroit, Michigan. Approximately 13-hour drive to Houghton. So even though we're in the same state, we're actually not very close to each other. But I am absolutely thrilled to see all of your digital faces in the flesh today, and can't wait to start working and learning with you and learning from you. Quick note about myself. Can you hear me okay? A note came up that said I switched to Portuguese, but I have not. That's for our Brazilian colleagues to lead us on. Okay. I'm by training, I'm an archaeologist. My expertise is in the archaeology of the Caribbean and also urban North America. So I kind of split my time between two very different geographical places and histories. But over the past 10, 15 years, I've been accumulating more and more interdisciplinary hats with my research. And that is because a lot of my work overlaps with public scholarship, public history, community archaeology. And so I've sort of developed into directions that overlap with historic preservation, urban planning, digital storytelling, and so on. And that led me to our colleagues at Michigan Tech. And we began partnering almost 5 years ago now on the deep mapping effort in the city of Hamtramck, which is a city within Detroit, if you're not familiar. So we'll get to know each other more over the course of the year. I'm going to be one of the leads on the project and one of the co-directors, and I'm going to be with a couple other people leading us through the community engagement side of the Deep Mapping Institute. And I would like to start by saying that, let's remember that the name of the institute, this is the NEH Community Deep Mapping Institute, and all of you have emphasized your different ties to community partners in your presentations and in your applications. So I think we all have a good sense by now who your community partners are. And because we're coming from all sorts of different disciplinary and institutional backgrounds, we define community very similarly, but also differently, depending on how we practice our work. So this is going to be a tremendous opportunity for us to kind of unpack what we mean when we say community, but also a challenge to kind of rein in definitions of that. So, so far in terms of community partners, we've heard about all types of people today. We've heard about our projects are working with nonprofits and museums and other institutions, tribal governments and organizations, local residents, city planners, libraries, you name it, other academic specialties. So, the key, those are the people we're working with, but in many cases, those are also the entities who we hope our deep map will serve. So we are creating with community partners, but we're also creating deep maps, hopefully in the service of some of these community partners or other communities. There's a lot of, I think when deep map projects are initially scoped, and we'll talk about this more in the coming workshops, a lot of ambition to create deep maps that are publicly accessible and interactive, and that's certainly been the case with our projects as well. But it's really important to be reflective upon what we mean when we're talking about the public. The general public, what is that? There's no kind of one generic general public out there, and especially when we start talking about digital media that has a global reach, really. There are many publics that overlap with our intended audiences. So we're going to push your teams to think about who your intended audiences are, who your stakeholders might be. So maybe not exactly people who are partners on the creation part of your project, but people in the immediate vicinity who are touched by the information you're generating and have a stake in the information that you're disseminating or asking them to engage with. So these are some of the questions we'd like you to start discussing within your team. The clearer an answer you have in mind to some of these questions, and there may never be a clear or one answer, the easier it might be to develop a deep map that speaks to certain priorities with your community partners. Don, are you advancing the slides? I'll have the next one, please. So I'm not going to go into all of this now in the interest of time, but I will highlight a few points that our group would, our directorial team would really like everybody to start thinking about. So in terms of working with community partners and stakeholders, there are many different facets and kind of best practices that we might adopt. And we're going to have a workshop on this in March. So we'll get more into these fine points. But some of the things I think it's really important to think about now is the type of information, how the type of information you might be gathering is representative of the communities that your work is trying to discuss and illuminate, how you might be engaging with sensitive or critical topics. But probably the most important point here is in establishing a professional and transparent partnership with your community partners or working operations. So establishing what your expectations are across your group, especially if you're involving multiple areas of expertise or different institutions, setting some realistic goals. If you're well familiar with each other and you have a trusting relationship already, maybe things don't have to be spelled out in such concrete terms. But if you're engaging in the first time with some with new community partners, it might be good at this stage to explore whether there needs to be some sort of memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement about how the information that gets put into the deep map is used by all the members of your group. And we'll talk more about that. And if you want to reach out to me before March to ask me, what did you mean by that? I'm happy to follow up with that. But the key is to be, key advice is to be transparent with your partner groups, your community partners at all stages of the project, and to start thinking about how when you're engaging the public, whoever that is in your conception of your project, that you're integrating ways into your work plan to solicit feedback and evaluation. And we'll talk about some examples for doing that in March. All right, next slide, please. We're going to talk more about ethics, professional conduct, and best practices in March, but I tried to do a little bit of research on this over the past few weeks to ask whether there are professional standards for doing digital humanities work that coincide with ethical practice. And the short answer is no. I mean, all of us are coming from a variety of disciplines. So my main professional association is the American Anthropological Association. We have a code of ethics. Our number one priority in our code of ethics is do no harm. So make sure the information you're producing and disseminating is doing no harm to community stakeholders, to descendant populations, to living people or their ancestors. And, you know, there's parallels in other ethical codes, like from the Public History Association, Modern Language Association, but there does not yet exist kind of ethical understandings that cross-cut digital humanities in an interdisciplinary way. So maybe we'll come away with some ideas for best practices and ethics. Maybe we can kind of, you know, casually draft a white paper during the in-person portion of the Institute or drum up something on our shared drive over the year. But I'd like us all to keep this in the back of our mind as we proceed. There are going to be distinctions we need to make in developing our projects between, you know, things that fall into the bucket of law or legal constraints and ethics, which is more gray area. So at this stage, before we even begin to the scoping workshop next month, it's probably important for your team to be aware of any policies or laws that might govern the use of the data sources you want to integrate. We're working across 4 different countries here, so our team is not an expert in international law, copyright law, and all that, but this information is fairly accessible online. You're going to be obligated to provide accurate information and source your content, and ensure that if you're including living people, that you're following the procedures for obtaining informed consent. If your deep map is going to be portrayed as a research tool and you're including information from living people, then that could be construed in some institutional settings as human subjects research. So we'll walk through that later. I can tell you from working with one of the projects in this group already that, at least in the US, some of the information coming in from users is not subject to IRB constraints. So I don't want anybody who works through IRB to panic at this stage. But the really important bit as you're starting to gather historic photos and personal documentation people might be sharing with you is to start thinking with your team about ways of receiving that consent to utilize what could be considered personal or intellectual property, and also be aware of the copyright rules where you're working. You're going to reproduce a lot of content, and the last thing we want is for you to get to the end of the year and have your big reveal of your prototype only to be told by another institution that you can't have that up there on the web. So so you will hear a lot more about community-based practices and ethics and challenges in our March workshop. I'm very keen to hear from any of you who have worked on ethical issues in the digital humanities previously. So if you have and you'd like to reach out to me before March, that would be really great. I'd love to include your advice in that workshop. And finally, I really appreciated it. Was one of the South Carolina presentations, I think, or maybe the Shakers, who mentioned that, creating this deep map is a labor of love, and it really is. I mean, we really deeply care about the communities we're working with and working for. And so that bookends the comment I started out with thinking about your audience. Keep asking yourself, who's going to care about my deep map? And I think that will help you really start to scope the community angle of it. Okay, so I will stop there and hand it over to my next co-director, James.
Thanks, Krista. So my name is James. I'm coming to you live from the Geospatial Research Facility here at Michigan Tech. Quite a few of you will get to see this space coming up in July. I'm an Institute co-director and also director of public participatory research and outreach for our Geospatial Research Facility here. I recently received my PhD in industrial heritage. My research really centered on answering the question, how can the integration of spatial narratives and deep mapping theory and practice improve upon the practice of public discourse and its impact on the representation of and in industrial heritage landscapes? And it really touches on a lot of the stuff we get to engage with in this institute, which is really fun for me. Before pursuing my PhD, I worked for a decade as a heritage professional and for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. My team was honored in 2018 with the Minnesota DNR Commissioner's Recognition Award for the community-centered research and heritage storytelling and mapping work that I developed over 3 years there at our site. I've led a whole bunch of community-centered heritage projects for the National Park Service, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and local heritage organizations up here in the Copper Country. And apart from all that work and my work here at the Geospatial Research Facility, I'm also working with the Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College and the Gada Youth STEM Camp, where I've been an educator for 8 years to co-create a community-centered deep map, which really centers the Fond du Lac Anishinaabe experience through the use of Anishinaabe language, storytelling, and community understandings of space, representation, and history. So there's my background. Let's get into a little bit of the technical stuff then that we're going to be talking about here. I've got the wonderful job of giving you dates and deadlines. So if you take a look on our website, you can scan the QR code and take a look at that. We've got our virtual workshop sessions. These are the things that we're all in right now. Everybody here is welcome to attend these. Orientation is here, and then as you look through, we can see we've got one every month, except for 2 in April, to prepare us for the Immersive In-Person Institute in July. The other thing we're really trying to do here, as Krista and everybody's mentioned, is this is really supposed to be a community of practice, right? Great man that was a politician when I was growing up. His name was Paul Wellstone in Minnesota, and he said, "We all do better when we all do better." So I'm really hoping that we can get everybody here to engage with each other, whether it's on Slack, through emails, or through our website, so that we can all work together to grow our maps and grow this practice together. And in doing so, what we've done is a lot of the people I work with, myself included, have set up virtual office hours for you. So if you've got questions about your map, or where you're progressing, or just how we've run things here in the Institute, where you can get data, where you can get resources, contact us through these virtual office hours that you see on the website. One of my colleagues will be talking more about how you can set those up shortly. The other thing I want to talk about when we talk about we can all do better when we all do better is we need to be able to share the stuff that we're learning together with other folks. And, in the academic world, at least, that means conferences. So we've got a number of conference opportunities that I'd like to visit with you about, and they're going to be up on the slide deck when that gets published on our website. The Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums has got conferences that go on in October. In November, we've got the Social Science Association's conference. And January, we've got the Society for Historical Archaeology, which should be pertinent to a number of you. And in May, of course, we have the Society for Industrial Archaeology. There could be others as well, and I'd encourage you, if you've got these networks, to share them with the rest of us so we can think about great opportunities for sharing our resources. Don or Sarah, who's ever got the deck, there we go. We're going to pass it along and talk about attendance expectations.
Yeah, I'll just pick this piece up for a minute, everybody. We just wanted to kind of set some norms and expectations and let people know, how we're trying to make the Institute as open and accessible to everybody as possible. So all of you are encouraged to participate in all the virtual workshops, the monthly workshops that James was just outlining. To have everyone in your teams to participate as many of the asynchronous modules as you want to be engaged with. You're all already on the Institute listserv, and so you're seeing you will that's a place for us to not just communicate among ourselves, but to also engage with a wider audience who are interested in deep mapping. And then we've got Slack, which one of my colleagues is going to talk about in a second. How we'll use that, and then the website itself. All of you chose your in-person fellows that are coming to the Keweenaw in July, and really we're looking for all of those fellows in order for them to get the most out of their time up here with us in person, to really, as much as possible, attend all of the virtual workshops, the monthly workshops, to be active on Slack, because especially as we get rolling along, that's where we're going to be sharing most of what's going to be happening throughout the Institute is going to be happening there. One of the dates that James highlighted is the project update meeting, which we'll talk about in more detail later as we get further along. But really, that's a point for all of you to do what you just did as an introduction for your projects, but more, where are you at now several months later, so that everybody can see how you're progressing. Someone mentioned, it's great to have an external check and balance. That's kind of what that is, kind of a target for yourselves. And also for us to, again, be able to together support the development of your projects and make sure we can make the most of the remaining months of the Institute. And then, of course, those in-person fellows are expected to be at the entirety of the immersive in-person component of the workshop in July. So we just wanted to kind of outline that those are sort of the attendance expectations. We recognize we're all humans with busy lives and other things. Just reach out to us if something comes up, and just keep that line of communication open so we can chat through any challenges that someone may be having. So, James, back to you.
Great, thanks, Don. So one of the things that Don mentioned is the attendance of our in-person workshop. And another thing I thought is, geez, we're more than an hour into this thing, and having people talk at you for over an hour can be a bit much. So if you scan the QR code there while I'm talking, you can dink around with one of my favorite things is our Q&A Time Traveler mobile app. In fact, you could do it on your phone while you're listening to me talk. I had somebody a long time ago tell me that I have a voice and a face for radio. So maybe looking at me might not be the best thing here anyway. But our host community is the Keweenaw Peninsula up here. You can learn more about the community and the institutions on our website or by clicking on those links. And in March, what I'll be doing is I'll be contacting each of our teams directly, and we'll be working together to get your flights planned, ordered, and delivered to you to our airport, the CMX airport up here. If you, Don, if you want to hit the button here, if you're wondering where CMX is, you can zoom in on this wonderful area on the Keweenaw Time Traveler mobile app. You can learn it's a very, very small airport. It is one gate, and you get off right on the tarmac. And the other unfortunate thing about being so small is we have a summer and a winter flight schedule. So the summer flight schedule hasn't been released, and that's why we're working in mid-March to do our one-on-one travel planning. As you see there, we'll purchase the flight for you. We will finalize housing accommodations, all that stuff at that time. One of the things you might notice when you go to the airport is there's this little orange dot that has a book on it. And if you click on it, Don, can you hit the button again? You're going to get one of our famous story points. So the Keweenaw Time Traveler app is all about heritage discourse, right? Giving anybody who feels invested in our Copper Country heritage from all over the world the opportunity to share their stories and memories and values with us. And here's a story about frigid fairy tales where Michigan Technological University in the 70s actually used to send snowballs down to, I think it was Texas, where they'd have snowball fights, and it was done right from the airport. You can read a whole bunch of stories on the app as you play with it. So now let's go down towards the Loriem Manor Inn. This is where we're going to be staying. The other thing you'll notice when you go to our app is in the middle portion, there's these different map buttons, and as you zoom in on the Loriem Manor Inn in Loriem, you'll be able to pick a different map to see how it changed over time. Don just pulled up a the Manor Inn was built in the early 1900s, and some pretty cool and famous people are a part of its history, and you can learn about it through these story points. More recently, it's the #1 historic B&B in America, which is pretty awesome to be able to stay in a place like that for 2 weeks. Thanks to Newsweek, we've got that award there. We're going to be using both the Victoria Hall and the Loriem Manor Inn, 19 rooms in total. Some of the fellows will be sharing some of the larger rooms. Maybe we'll be putting 2 or so in a room, and we'll be talking with you one-on-one about what works best for your team and making sure we can accommodate everybody comfortably. And the best thing about this space as you explore it is there's so much opportunity for us to all get together and visit after we've been doing all of our hard work at Michigan Tech or been out in the community throughout the week. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And I hope that you can explore it through their website and through the time travel. All right, I think that's what I've got. Let's see, what's up next?
It's me. Yeah, so hi everybody. I'm Mark Rhodes. You haven't heard from me yet. I'm the 6th co-director of the Institute. I'm a geographer here at Michigan Tech. My work is primarily looking at heritage institutions, industrial heritage institutions, but also kind of really heritage institutions widely, thinking about the institutions themselves, whether it's museums or national parks or World Heritage sites, whatever it might be. My involvement with the Institute is more on the kind of like Krista, on the community-based side and the public practice. My work has kind of spanned from working for communities to working with communities to working in maybe more of a standoff type approach. But I kind of span that spectrum of community-based research in Wales, but also elsewhere in Europe, and then across the United States as well. I'm here to talk a little bit more about what you could be doing or should be doing now as we prepare. And two of the big things, the first being kind of establishing or identifying these community partners and planning for your kind of broader community partnerships if you haven't already been doing so. So that kind of key date, March 7th, is when we're going to be doing our virtual session on community-based practice and ethics and research. So our ideal goal will be for you to kind of have a plan going into that that session, so where at least you know the who, generally the how, and the why behind your community-based partners and planning. In general, with any community-based work, the earlier the better when you're doing this work, because it depends on how you're actually engaging with the community, right? Are you scoping your project with the community? Like, do you want the project itself to be community scoped? And if that's the case, and you haven't really kind of if you're in that early stage, that you need to be doing immediately, right? If you're more interested in having the community involved in some way, but maybe they're not taking the lead in the project, right? That's also something you could be working on now, making those contexts if you haven't already, scoping out what the role that they would be in the process. Or what is, if that's more of a public kind of end product of communicating to the public, communicating to communities, just identifying how are you thinking about this project and who needs to be involved. Speaking with those folks earlier, the better, because in community-based research, there's this kind of phrase when we're thinking about, are we waiting for a group or are we waiting upon a group? And in community-based work, ideally, if you're working for a community, you're waiting upon that community rather than waiting for them to kind of, okay, catch up, because our times are different, right? Not that academia works at anything that we would consider a quick pace, but compared to community groups that have perhaps fewer resources, perhaps working on their own ideas of time and space, being more flexible in considering how long it might take to hear from individuals, to hear from stakeholders, to get consensus from different community members. Again, starting earlier, the earlier you start, the better with these types of things. You can click the slide. And then the other thing is kind of thinking on the next month Institute virtual workshop will be on data linking, HSDI, and data management. And so if we're thinking about making sure you at least kind of identify and have a plan for your community groups going into that workshop so that you can kind of maybe get a little bit more applied approach to things. The same thing is true with this April 4th workshop. The more of your data that you can have collected, cleaned, organized, unified, the better for when it comes to actually learning about, okay, how do you link this data? How do you think about HSDIs, and how do you perform best practices in data management if this isn't something that some of you already have expertise in this area. And that means, depending on where you are in your process, right? If you haven't already started, if you're in the early days of your deep mapping project, starting to collect the data now so that you have, you're not, if you're starting now, you're probably not going to have all your data by April 4th, but making sure that you have a representative sample, or perhaps you can complete one portion of whatever the project might be, so that you're coming into that workshop with data in hand that you can practice with it, making sure you think about how, when it comes to data management and linking and things like that. When we say cleaning the data, that is going to look very different for all of the different groups, depending on what your data is, whether that is kind of oral histories, images, or the geospatial data itself. And then starting to organize it, right? That's going to be the topic of the workshop. But, again, the more that you can think about having, at least knowing where everything is and having it in somewhat of a logical order, that's going to help a lot when it comes to putting things into a proper data management system. And unifying is just thinking about now, if you're in the process of collecting data, thinking about trying to keep things orderly in the same types of data files, right? If you're collecting images, can you start to make sure those images are the same file format? Or can you, think about, are you using Google Sheets for some things and Excel for others? If you can try to consolidate some of your data types now, that's going to help going forward. And I think that is all I have.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I am Bob Cowling, GIS data librarian here at Michigan Tech. My background is in GIS data management and dissemination, historical GIS web application development, and I really like to use GIS to build discovery tools for historical content. How can we really build like interactive applications and get people interested in archival content, old photographs, old maps? And I think a lot of times we can do that through deep mapping and libraries as well. My role in this institute, I am a member of the technical staff. What that means is essentially I can help you with technical aspects of deep mapping. If you need a consultation on any technical deep mapping aspect, you can schedule office hours with me. I can help you with user interface design. Maybe you need to select the appropriate web mapping platform. If you want ArcGIS, Mapbox, Leaflet, or maybe the appropriate framework, like do you want a web app, a mobile app, a combination of both? I'm going to be working on a lot of asynchronous materials on web mapping, digitizing and georeferencing, as well as I've already kind of built a low-code deep mapping mobile application. So if you want, you can all have your own sweet mobile app. I'm going to talk a little bit about Slack. I won't spend too much time on this. I know a lot of you are already on the Slack channel, but if you're not familiar with Slack, it's basically a messaging platform that allows you to easily communicate and collaborate. Slack is made up of workspaces and several channels are within that you can communicate. A couple of different types of channels, and it's important to differentiate public and private. So public channels are where anyone in the workspace or in that channel can see what you wrote and communicate with you. They often have a little asterisk or a pound sign next to them or hashtag. So private channels, which have a lock next to them, that's where you can communicate privately with your team only. The only people that can see what you wrote in that channel are your team members or institute staff or project co-directors. So really, I think the idea behind this is we want to have a place where you can collaborate and communicate, share ideas, reading materials, and you can also share files here if you want, photos, PDF documents, any sort of readings you want. Importantly, the office hour request channel, that is where you would go to book office hours with myself or Don or James or Ryan, depending on what you may need help with. So you can also download the Slack desktop client. I really like this. You don't have to navigate to a web browser to use it. You'll get desktop notifications. You can always stay in the loop with what's going on. And if you want to be really connected, you can get a mobile app on your phone. And then you will know as soon as someone messages you all the time, no matter where you are. Next slide, please, Don. Now I'm going to talk a little bit here about the Institute website that we have. So what's really important about this website is this is where you're literally almost going to find everything within the Institute, where you can stay up to date on information, the Institute schedule, mainly the important dates for the workshops, information about in-person travel, and traveling resources. And really important are links to our technical resources that we're going to be producing. For example, we have ArcGIS Enterprise Portal, how to access that. We're in the process of setting up our own instance of Map Warper. We have an Institute Google Drive and GitHub repositories for some sort of our workshops on mobile application development. And we are also going to have some virtual training modules. You could find workshop recordings here, how-to guides for technical resources like how to use Map Warper, how to digitize building footprints off of historical Sanborn maps, how to geocode, everything like that, how to use Enterprise Portal. And at some point, we'll be posting a bibliography. And it's very important that you constantly visit this website for important updates throughout the Institute. And you can go to qanihistory.com/deep mapping. Thank you.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks, Bob. My name's Ryan Williams. I'm a geospatial research scientist, and I help run the geospatial research facility up here at Michigan Tech in Houghton. I've been doing GIS for 25 years now, so I'm kind of the GIS guy here. So I hope to help all of you with the really interesting and engaging projects here to solve problems, to work on things that you want to create, help get your data ready, work with Bob and Dan and Don and everybody here to help you create what you'd like to create and work through that. As Bob said, we'll have office hours and lots of opportunities to connect with you virtually and some of you in person. So some of the tools that I want to talk about today, one of the things that I focus on a lot now at Michigan Tech is our enterprise GIS. So this is GIS that's not just on your desktop, but it's out on the internet and out on the web. You may have already used ArcGIS Online. You may have used an ArcGIS portal. The portal is basically ArcGIS Online. It's just hosted here at Michigan Tech. You can use this resource that we host. You can use, if you have access to your own resources like that, you can host data on that as well. And we're able to use data from a multitude of sources and put them into different applications like Bob described, using a lot of different platforms and options out there. You're not limited just to the Esri option. But so one option we do have is the Esri option. ArcGIS Enterprise, we call it the portal here. It's kind of tailored toward hosting geospatial data, and it's special in that because when you host your data on that, it's instantly reusable as a GIS service that could be used in other web apps, or it could be brought into your own GIS desktop software. You don't have to download the data. You could use it, explore it right there in the portal. You can download it if you prefer to do that and work with it on your local system. That's an option there too. You can also use it to host what I call reference data, so non-geospatial data items like documents. We've done links to videos before. You can put recordings on there. So if there's things that you just want to organize in there, you can do that. These data, the geospatial data and the non-geospatial data, access to them can be restricted so that it's just to you and the administrators, or could be shared broadly to the public or the entire group. ArcGIS Enterprise is really a platform for the data management, but also for the creation of web maps, story maps, web applications like Bob talked about there, though. So you can use this as your platform to make all of those different things in there and host it without having to set up your own if you don't already have access to that. It also provides an application programming interface, an API. So your data is in here. Bob's able to use this resource to connect and pull your data down into those different applications that could be hosted wherever, could be on your phone, could be on a computer, things like that. Next slide, please. So the other thing I'll mention is Google Drive. If anybody here hasn't heard of Google Drive, we can teach you about it. We have a very robust Google Drive here at Michigan Tech, and we're able to offer access to that up to people working on the Institute and your projects here. Really, Google Drive, you could put any data you want on there, right? It isn't instantly reusable for geospatial data. So if you've got maps, if you've got spatial data sets that you'd like to be able to quickly reuse, put in a web map, view and look at some of the data in it, Google Drive's a little bit of a slower option. It's kind of a deeper archive. But for other data, such as collaboratively edited data, like Mark had mentioned, Google Sheets or spreadsheets, things like that, this could be really useful if you want to share things and edit things like that across the group. It can also be used for just traditional documents to be stored in there. Data on there can be downloadable or it can be instantly viewable. Again, here, access can be restricted to a certain group of people or it can be shared broadly. Really, when we use Google Drives here, we use it a lot for project data storage. So somewhat of a short-term project archive. It's got a backup. It's a good spot to keep things. We use it a lot for project management and data management. So sometimes we have a requirement to host data in a place that's easily accessible by a lot of different people with secure access. Google Drive typically fits that bill for our projects. It can also be a good place to store large file collections. So if you've got giant zips or giant archives of data or zips of image collections that don't need to be instantly accessible in a geospatial environment, you just want to have a good spot to store and share those. This can do that as well too. So Google Drive, ArcGIS Portal are both some of the resources we've got here that we're all happy to help you use and share. So next slide, please. I think this is James. Am I wrong?
It can be. How about that, Ryan?
It's Don, actually. What?
That's all right. I can talk about it. If Don wants to jump in, he can. These are our virtual office hours. I'll keep it quick here. Don can jump in to add stuff if he wants after I'm done. But the idea here is if you need any technical, professional, or any other support, these are the office hours we're providing. The key thing here is to make sure that we can help support you in the best way that we can, we'd like you to reserve a time about a week in advance. A lot of the problems that people have, if you give them to us right off the bat, it takes us a little bit of time to investigate the problem from our end and then work to find a solution. So if you can give us a week, then Ryan or Bob or I or a combination of all of us can get together and work on your problem. And that way, when you arrive at your office hours, we've got a solution for you. We can explain how we got to that solution and really make sure that we have the best use of your time so you can go back to your team with what the fix is. Does that make sense? So just submit the request at the office hour channel in Slack. And if you're having an issue with that, you can always work to email one of us directly and we'll make sure that we put the request in the office hour channel in Slack. Don, am I missing anything?
We have a good question from Jackie. Who's asking, beyond the videos, will we be sharing the slides for the office hours? And I think, Jackie, you mean just all of these slides, correct?
Yes.
Right. And the answer is yes. These will be posted on the website.
Will be in Slack too. Yep.
Slack as well.
Yeah. So thanks, James. That was great. So other questions, comments, moments of excitement. The rest of us directors are slacking in the background while you guys are talking and doing your presentations, and we're all so excited about the composition of teams we put together. And I would just love to just open it up. Questions, comments. Sabrina, we actually support other JERC funded projects. I'm Canadian also, so I know the drill on this. We've got workarounds for that. No problem.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep. Mark, I'll let you run the questions. Go ahead.
Yeah. Katie, do you want to ask your question or do you want me to?
I think there's one in the Q&A.
Yeah, Katie's asking, are we supposed to have access to a Google Drive?
I thought I saw something about that in the bigger email chain, but I didn't see anywhere that we had access to a Google Drive, just the Google list thing.
Yeah.
Ryan or James, do you have an answer to that?
Sure. Bob and I, Bob worked really hard to create the drive. We just went through and reviewed to make sure that folders and everything are all set up. And I plan to talk with Bob right after the meeting and add all of your emails to the drive. So you should have access, oh, I'd say within a half an hour after we hang up off the call. Sound like a plan?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Similar with the portal data, it'll take me longer than a half an hour. It'll be next week before we've got y'all added on there. But yeah, similar there. Once we're done here, we'll add that list to the access there.
Don, we have a question for you. How do you pronounce your last name?
Depends if you ask my mom or my dad. One's Anglophone and one's Francophone. So Lafreniere would be the Francophone way of saying it. So Lafreniere is the Anglophone. So either one. All the students call me Dr. Don, but whatever. I'm just Don. Thanks, Laura.
And then Martin Lively, for ArcGIS and Google Drive data, I assume our access to that data will extend through the end of the Institute, but not afterwards. Is that correct? I think that will extend beyond, but I will let Ryan or James or Bob answer that.
Yeah, that's the plan, is that it would extend beyond the Institute, right? So we plan to keep that up and available and on there.
Yeah, I'll just extend that and say that we have a mandate both institutionally and within what we the aims of the Institute itself to have this continue on beyond just the 1 year of the Institute itself. So we support a lot of projects already from around the Great Lakes region and beyond, and all your projects will be included within that. So
Martin, you just raised your hand? Do you want to ask more
I
on
did.
that?
If I could just follow up on that real quickly. I know from another project that it can be very, very difficult to move a project from one Esri account to another. And I know from my perspective for our group in Oklahoma, it would be really helpful because we do have some access to Esri accounts to maybe this is an office hours question, maybe it's a general topic of conversation, but to think about where we put our data, whose account we created in, especially since being community-based and community accessible is such a big theme of this institute. You know, I would hate for any group, ours included, to wind up getting locked into something where it's like, oh, wait, from a long-term sustainability perspective, this creates real challenges. So,
yeah, if you've got access to your own resources or community resources, that is great. If you can use that, we can help facilitate that as well and answer questions and lessons we've learned along the years here. I don't get anything by hosting your data, right? I don't get a royalty for every time your data gets clicked, right? So we're just here with that resource. So if there's someone that doesn't have access to that at all, doesn't have the resources to either fund it or just get it spun up, we're here to offer that as a spot to start. But yeah, you're right. It can be difficult to move the project once you built it. It's not impossible. It can be done. We've done some with server upgrades and things like that in the past. But yeah, if you have your own resources, we're happy to help you work with those as well. That's great too. So generally, they're all very similar in how they work and look and feel. So we are happy to help you work on your own platform. And if you have it, I actually encourage it, right? Because that gets you using it. You kind of own it more that way, right? It's on your place and there for you. So we can help you with that too.
yeah, I would say, Martin and others who may have your own resources, book a time with Bob or Ryan or I, and let's talk through, because the infrastructures we built are not off the shelf Esri stuff. But we can also teach you how to build what we built, right? So there's different ways that we could do this and scope it. I mean, I think we'd probably have to get into the technical weeds with you a bit to know what would be the right way forward. So, and we're happy to do that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't see any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A or other hands. Any other questions that anyone has? We are 3 minutes away from 2 hours, which is a good resilience on Zoom, everyone.
That is good. Yeah, and that's pretty good timing. I'm impressed. Well, thank you everybody again very much for your enthusiasm, your interest, your passions. I'm really looking forward to seeing how all this comes together. I think we have just a really amazing group of people here. Just connect with us formally, informally. We look forward to seeing everybody for sure in a little less than a month's time. Okay. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good weekend.